Hello there. It's time for me to take you into the breach. Don't worry about it too much. What does that mean? Well, I don't know. We're both watching here. The opening cutscene, and that's it, right? No more lore. It's time for the game. So if you want to know what this game is, in terms of its in-universe context, you're gonna struggle. Don't worry about that too much. It's a 1 out of 10 for plot into the breach, that's for sure. We just have to fight some giant insects on some islands. If you have questions about any part of that sentence, you're going to be in trouble. Don't try to get too immersed in Into the Breach. It's a very old school game, a gamey game. And if you want more top quality commentary, such as calling a game a gamey game, the word gamey is a great way to describe a game. Let's see if I can describe this game in a more interesting way. What I want to do is tell you why Into the Breach is really good. And then later, if you want to see me saying that it's bad, you'll be in luck, because there's also another way to describe this game, in such a way that it seems really bad. So we're just going to do both, but we're going to do the good one first. Why? Because that's what happened to me first. When I started playing this game, which is actually not this footage, this is from the second session playing the game, because I don't have footage of the first session, because I wasn't planning on talking about it, I really liked this game. I started playing it on my Steam Deck, and well, the reason I couldn't keep playing it is because the Steam Deck deleted my save, so I've actually started the game again here, hence all the tutorial pop-ups. But it's actually my second time playing, not that it matters, I'm just going to rant. What we're going to do is we're going to think about why is Into the Breach, this thing I'm showing you here, so good. First, I thought I'd introduce the reason I thought I liked it by talking about why past me would not like this game. This is a game where you have to focus on doing the objective. I've talked about this sort of thing in games a few times before. There are kinds of strategy games that are like this one, where the only goal is to complete an objective, and it doesn't matter anything else. You don't have to complete it well, it's all the same. The other classic example I keep bringing up in other videos is Valkyria Chronicles, and the reason this is interesting is it really gives you a counterintuitive way to play a game, and it gives you an interesting way to play a game. And to contextualize that, I'll go back to the rant I was going to make just a second ago. The rant being that normally, when I was younger, for example, I preferred strategy games to be like Total War, where there is context and meaning to everything. So for example, what happens in a battle permanently affects the long-term progress of the campaign in, say, the older Total Wars at the very least. But in, say, an Into the Breach battle, you don't have to defeat the enemy. Like, this is one of the big things. You come into your giant battle against insects, you might think, should I take out the insects? No! And that's the interesting thing about Into the Breach. It's a strategy game where your only goal is to do what it says in the top right. And in the top right, you can see it's just counting down to us winning. So what are we supposed to do? I don't know, nothing. You just win if you don't do anything, so have fun. And that's basically what Into the Breach is. And what you do in the meantime, your attempts to just keep the game going so that you don't lose, are really fun. There are loads of cool things you can do that constantly inspire you with new ideas for tactics. And so often the tactics aren't like kill the enemy. So it's really refreshing in that way, but it's the exact sort of thing that past me probably wouldn't like. Like, past me, and current me really, doesn't like chess, because it has no context. Chess has terrible gameplay. I'm like, what? It's a game where you can just sacrifice all of your pieces because the only thing that matters is winning? There's no real world analog to this, because the pieces would actually continue existing after the game, and not having them does make a difference. So that's where my Total War brain comes in, where it's like, well, you want to actually strategize to win with minimal losses, or not engage if you can't do that. There shouldn't be battles at all costs or something like that. And Valkyria Chronicles was the other case where you have to learn to love the idea that you have to make some real stupid plays, some things that wouldn't work in real life, because the only goal of the game is to complete the objective. So in Into the Breach, as I said, the objective is just to not lose, which means you have a lot of freedom, and the things you do to not lose are going to end up being quite interesting. So for example, right here, what's going on? There are 3 enemies, and all of these red hashed areas and the red dots represent that they're going to attack these buildings. Your health bar in the game, so to speak, is that thing at the top left, your energy level, and it goes down when buildings are attacked. So the not lose condition you're looking to do is to not have the buildings be attacked, and killing the enemies obviously is one way of doing that, and in this case I just did that. But as you progress through the game, you'll quickly learn that there are tons of things you can do that aren't killing the enemies that actually protect the buildings a little bit better in some respects. And it's also a game where the big feature to remember is that because it's just counting down to you winning, if the final turn, say, has the entire map swarmed with enemies, it's a terrible strategic situation. You just win anyway. That's where past me, the immersion-seeking me, will complain and say, why is the game rewarding you so heavily for playing so poorly? And you have to just change your headspace and be like, well, in the context of this game, playing well just means the objective. There's nothing else to think about. So it's very pure. It's very gamey. Yes, I think that is the best way to describe this game in retrospect. It is quite literally a game, and you do need to keep that in mind. Other games might try to encourage you to think about it in a more realistic sense or a more immersive sense. Don't worry about it. I think that what it has right here is real good. Like this move I'm considering. Why don't I just stand in the path of the enemy's attack? Now I don't lose health on the buildings. The mechs do have health, but you can restore your health every turn if you want, and is restored at the end of every combat encounter. It also doesn't matter very much if the mechs die, so really sacrificing yourself to protect the buildings, that's pretty fine. This is the goal of the game, to protect civilian lives. And when you combine this with the rules that you don't need to kill the enemy, it might be advantageous to not kill the enemy, like right here, where I'm going to make one enemy block the spawning of another enemy, effectively killing that future enemy and doing damage to the current one, so a better move than just killing the enemy, things like that. And all of this works together because of the movement mechanics. This is going to become more clear the more footage I show you of the game if you don't know what I mean, but we saw just there, I attacked an enemy which made them move onto a mine and die, and we've also got a case where I've made the enemies attack each other, and then the enemies are attacked by new enemies coming onto the field and are killed by it. So there are loads of positioning-based mechanics all over the game, which gets you to the point when you don't need to worry about killing the enemies, because positioning the enemies in interesting ways gives you way more cool strategies than just attacking them. And lots of attacks have effects where it moves the enemy. At first, it's a bit more standard. The first set of mechs it lets you play with mainly just attack the enemy. They do damage, but they can move the enemy by one tile as well in the direction of your attack. So nothing too radical, but it makes a difference. Like right there, I shot that enemy. Now the enemy will just attack open space during its turn, and that's perfectly fine. Doesn't matter that I didn't kill it, because I just didn't lose health. The only goal is not to lose health. Health being the power, I should say. The health on the mechs is fine to lose. We're going into the last turn, meaning all I have to do is stop those two insect things attacking those two buildings at the end of the last turn, and then we win. I don't have to kill them, I don't have to attack that other enemy if I don't want to. This is a pretty simple situation where there's not that much going on, so the sort of interesting part of the strategy isn't so clearly revealed here in the beginning. But that was a pretty neat move, wasn't it? We avoided ourselves and a building being attacked with a single strike. We can take out the other enemy, and that'll be that stage 1. So what I'm going to have to do is talk you through a few stages of Into the Breach. I'm going to do just a gameplay commentary and try to talk about why I think certain moves are interesting. And perhaps you'll get what I'm putting down here over time. It's sort of hard to describe because it's a feeling I'm describing. The feeling of satisfaction when you constantly discover new strategies because of the freedom you have to move around. And because perhaps it doesn't seem like you have so much freedom at first, you're always realizing new things in the stages. Such as, like, if I move this enemy here, it will attack that enemy, which stops them doing this thing, and then I can do this thing. You chain up these moves. And an important part of this, which I'll mention now because there's no other good time to mention it, is if you had, say, the enemy have an AI, like a proper AI, where it's playing against you, you'd have something more like chess, where the puzzle you're trying to solve, the combat puzzle, is what are they going to do? So you're trying to second guess someone else's moves. I think the reason this game is satisfying and makes for a neat puzzle combat experience is that the enemy is random as far as I can tell. You don't know what their moves are going to be. So you don't need to set up or prepare for anything. It's more like a series of puzzles. At the start of each turn, the map has changed, like seemingly at random, with little rhyme or reason, and you just have to do something about whatever happened. And there are usually enough options in the game that you can solve the situation. Not necessarily, the random element might make things too difficult to solve or make it impossible to avoid damage. I don't know if they've programmed it in some very clever way so that there's always a solution to every scenario, but the point is, each new turn is a new scenario. There's very little you can do to prepare turn to turn other than just play well in the previous turns. You don't need to think, should I do this because the enemy might move to this location in the next turn? All of your headspace, all of your thought is on this turn because it simply tells you what the enemy will do, and you have no idea what they'll do after that if you don't kill them. So I like the way there's not too much to worry about, I suppose. You're in a situation where you can fully understand all of the strategic information that you need to use to make the correct decisions. Doesn't mean you will, and of course, my gameplay is filled with mistakes, although more so in the beginning because I didn't realize you can actually undo your moves. Once you have undo move available as an option and to sort of remember you can do it, the game actually becomes a fair bit easier because you can try things out to check what the range of your unit will be in a new position and then just move it back without committing to that move, things like that. Games often do that, but I sort of thought maybe the game's simple enough that it's trying not to do that, like you have to think of that in your head and then pull the strategy off. You can try things in your turn and then go back in time to some extent, but I would probably be fine if it didn't do that. But anyway, I think the game is both simple enough that you can fully understand what it's asking you to do and come up with comprehensive strategies quite fast, so it's not too annoying to think about it for my tiny brain, and it's nice that essentially every turn that puzzle refreshes. It's like doing 1,000 Sudoku puzzles over and over again, with only tangential connections between them. And that's essentially what this game is. And while I'm praising this right now, what I'm going to be ultimately doing is taking that same spirit and using that as a criticism of the game later. It's just loads of combat puzzles, but it would be nice if it wasn't just loads of combat puzzles. So this is confusing. I'm praising it for being like this. I really like the combat puzzle aspect of the game. I also don't like it at all in another sense. Well, whatever, we're sticking to saying that the game is good, for now at least. So I guess I'll progress out of this pointless rant I'm making to try and talk through a few situations in the game that maybe will illustrate why I like it. Like this one right here actually, that's pretty good. I can attack 3 enemies, killing one because of the water, damaging one because it hit a rock after moving, and then damaging the other 2 on the left because they rammed into each other because of the way the artillery shots move nearby units around a bit, but also units can't be on the same tile, so they bounce off each other and thus do damage to each other instead. Then we move that unit back to block the enemy's spawn for the next turn. You can see though that I just took damage on the building there. The goal, of course, is not to do that. It's only because I was too bad to avoid that situation. I simply wasn't thinking right. I was probably so excited to make that artillery shot that I didn't think about what I really needed to do. Well, that will get better with time, but since the stage is pretty much over, we've done this one. Here's a neat little setup in the next stage, although to be fair, or to be unfair to the game, to be not overly positive, this kind of really cool strat we're going to be doing in this stage usually isn't available. So firstly, we're blocking an enemy attack at the bottom of the screen, and at the top you saw me moving an enemy towards that dam to damage the dam. The dam has a health bar and can be removed from play, and that's going to be intriguing. The downside to staying on our side of the map while doing that, by the way, is that it lets the enemy spawn more, so now there are enemies all over the place. However, we have a way to get out of this. We can move our regular tank forwards and shoot at the dam. I was doing this very experimentally because I expected this to kill me as well as the enemy. Turns out your units are more waterproof, so you just get submerged, and you can't fight while you're submerged, but you can get out again. And all of the enemies are just wiped off the map. That was pretty good. Normally you can't do anything that powerful, but there are a few special things you can do on stages now and again. But that was good. So after that we move forward and can just stop the enemy spawning to make the rest of the stage relatively easy. This one guy who spawns will attack that building. Obviously that's easy enough to get around because we can just move him. But I'm also going to shoot again to finish that guy off because you do get experience points for killing enemies. So while this is a game where, as I said, you don't have to kill the enemy, and I think it's even more fun not to kill them because you get more options if the enemy's alive, you do have to do it to get experience points, and experience points do make the game easier as you go along. And I'm sort of thinking maybe that's a bad thing. Maybe it would be better if experience points were more granted based on completing objectives rather than killing enemies, because I like leaving them alive to do shenanigans, but I also feel like I shouldn't because we're missing out on upgrades if you do that. Well anyway, here are those upgrades I was talking about. As you level up and occasionally in item drops, you get power pods, which give you a point to spend on something, and it's just some basic upgrades there. I usually focus on trying to grab the move and health upgrades, especially the move upgrades, because having more moves is just always useful in a game like this where you have very few moves, and getting that one extra tile can make enormous differences. The other thing that happened back there, which I was surprised by when I first played, is it locks you off from doing all of the stages on the island. Once you've conquered a few regions, it just says, right, that's the end of that, we're going into the final stage. And I thought, why would they do it like that? Why would they offer you these stages and then you just don't do them in the end? And it was the first hint to me when I was playing completely blind for the first time, that this game is going to have certain mechanics that more favour a system where it doesn't let you do everything. Well, we'll just have to come back to that. Doesn't matter. Let's try and keep things as pure as possible in the headspace that I was in while playing. This is the stage I got to the first time I played, but I lost because this boss enemy can do a lot of damage to a lot of tiles, and if you get unlucky they can basically knock you out of the game from nearly full health instantly. So you have to be careful about this guy, and I suppose I wasn't. I don't have the footage anymore, but I got owned in this stage. This time we're going to play things a bit differently. The main focus is to not be in that headspace of thinking I need to just kill the enemy. You don't need to kill them, you just need to move them, you just need to play with them, and if you can, get them to kill each other. So we're just doing the basics here. I'm just moving the enemy to the side, and there you go. I'm not going to take tons of damage. We've got a free shot this turn that I don't really need to take because there was nothing else to do, and things are pretty casual, so they can switch between being in a state where you're about to die to things being absolutely fine with a single enemy moving one tile, and that's why things feel so powerful in this game. Just little moves, little clever tweaks can really change how things are going to go. So we've done it again in this next turn. We'll kill that enemy and use this other enemy to block another enemy spawning. That's what we like to see, although we didn't need to do that in that case since they were already going to do it. The boss enemy is hopelessly destroying some rocks in the corner. It's a setup where the thing that I'm saying is good about this is also what people might not like about it. To put it another way, someone from like a strategy game background might look at this strategy game and say, well, the only reason you win is because the AI is really bad by design. It's stupid. It's like random and it doesn't change its decisions based on what you're doing. So obviously you can just game it to win. The whole game is an exploit or something, somebody might say. Well, I enjoy this aspect. The AI being completely brain dead lets you play around with them. Like here, we're going to make the enemy attack itself and we can just walk out of their damage area of effects to not take damage. Well, that was pretty easy. And you can feel the criticism that someone would just say, well, yeah, it is pretty easy. Like, why are you saying this is a great puzzle game? If you just don't stand on the tiles where you don't die. What's the puzzle? Well, there's something enjoyable about it. The fact that you're taking these really easy mechanics and just toying with the enemy to get the results you want. I quite like it, especially because if you have to go through the process like I did of slightly changing your mindset to get to that point of realizing you don't need to take things so seriously from a strategy game perspective and think about we have to kill this enemy so that they are not present in all future battles like a long-term strategy game would do. It's more like the enemy's here, doesn't matter if you kill them, they'll just go and die off screen, they'll be deleted in the RAM if you don't kill them now. You could do it if you like for experience points, but it might be funnier if you just made them move sideways and attack one of their comrades instead. Stuff like that, and it feels quite fun. With that stage done, you're allowed to go to the shop at the end of each set of stages to spend the stars you were collecting. I tended to spend them on getting the power points to upgrade the mechs, but you could also buy weapons and change things out on the loadouts. Obviously, playing for the first time, didn't really know what would be a good choice, so I just generally went for the generic passive upgrade, like have more health. There's always more you can do if you have more health and more move, so can't go too far wrong. So here I am, in my actual gameplay, finally completing the first island, only to discover that what happens after that is there are more islands, so it just keeps going from here in much the same way. And there was something about the tooltip information coming up that really implied that we're going to be doing this not only again in the sense of we're fighting in another island, but we'll be going back to the original island as well. It's becoming clearer and clearer what the secret of the game is. It's sort of a roguelike. Well, it actually isn't a roguelike, and I'm going to argue that I would have liked it more if it was more of a roguelike, despite me being in the anti-roguelike super haters club who's been stung too many times by accidentally discovering that a game is a roguelike too late. Well, this is a rant, I think, for much later. This game has some elements of a roguelike, mainly that you'll be expected to repeat the game at least one time at some point. That's all I know so far in this footage right here, but it goes further than that, obviously. We're going to come back to that as it actually comes up in the game. Well, for now, let's just go through this first game and look for any cool moments, I suppose. There's probably too many things that are happening, and clearly I'm too genius to report on all of my best moves. So let's see if there's anything particularly interesting that highlights the sort of use of easy mechanics to do cool-looking things that I'm trying to get at. As I said, I don't think the feeling of satisfaction the game gives you can really just be communicated by claiming that it does. You'll have to try it for yourself, but maybe you can sympathise why. Look there, an attack that normally does 1 damage, killed an enemy, that's good. Now we can effectively kill an enemy with this guy by blocking an enemy spawn, which also prevents us taking damage on that building. All good stuff. There's another spawn blocked as well. So 2 enemies killed effectively just by blocking spawns in exchange for taking 1 damage. Or is it? Well, it turns out this new enemy in the desert stage has the ability to move you around as well. There are a few cases where the enemy can move you just like you can move them. And well, you just have to take that into account because maybe you can get them to move you where you want. You still have the advantage of knowing everything the enemy will do and the enemy being too stupid to adapt their strategy. You could say that's a weakness of the game. I say it's what makes the game good. Here was a mistake I made lots of times, especially in the beginning. Not realizing that if you get moved into a building or if you move an enemy into a building, that's equivalent to attacking it. So I quite often lost health to things like that. In this stage, as you can see, we actually lost a mech, and that's going to be an issue because once you don't have a move, because you only have 3 moves, going down to 2 moves is a massive difference. So here in this next turn, we've got loads of enemy attacks coming in, and it's just going to be impossible to do anything about that. So that's the end of that, really. I like to believe the game hasn't been programmed so that you can always complete a situation without taking damage or without dying. I don't quite know. I feel like it would be too difficult to program that, but maybe they did. So I suppose there's a luck element in that where the enemies go, where they spawn, where they attack, might make stages easy, it might not. In this case, I was unable to avoid tons of damage. Some of the damage there was actually because I didn't realise the enemy were buffed so that when you kill them, they explode, doing extra damage, so that was a shame. And with the loss of our tank, I thought, is this going to be a problem? The answer is kind of. It just gives you the tank back. But now it doesn't have a pilot, instead it's autopiloting. This doesn't mean anything for you as the player, but it means that the unit doesn't gain any experience points. This effectively will make the unit weaker, and the earlier in the game this happens, the more of a problem it's going to be. It's a situation where I saw the positive feedback loop. I thought, well, the optimum thing to do now is to start the game again, because it will just get worse and worse from here. I didn't, because I thought, well, normally in the house rules of OFFD, everything is Iron Man to see what happens and stir up drama, of course, and find things to complain about too. In this game, though, there's very little advantage to playing it like that. There's no real Iron Man glory to be had, and, well, we'll see why that is later. For now, we move on. Did a funky move there to knock an enemy into myself in order to damage it and kill it, and also with the same move, avoid damage, that's all good. I then got into this situation, which I just stared at for a long time. We're being attacked in 4 different places, and we're going to have to do quite a lot in the same turn to avoid damage. And I was thinking, is there a way to get around this? And again, the question for me is, did the developers make it so that there is always a way to get around it? Like the enemy are limited in how much damage they can attempt to do so that you can get out of it somehow? I don't know. because I feel like the algorithm to work that out would be so complicated that maybe we are just screwed and there's no ideal strategy to avoid it. Well, here's what I ended up doing. Not sure if this is a good idea, but it's what I went for in the end. We can avoid some damage with a move. We can kill the bigger enemy, which avoids 2 sets of damage, leaving the 3rd set of damage, or the 4th set of damage, over on the left to just happen. The only consolation is that we can do 2 points of damage to enemies with this particular setup, so that's something. And that is something about the game. It's nice that there are little minor considerations you can make where something will happen, then something else will happen, then something else will happen, and that 3rd thing is the thing you can be going for in your strategy. And then after that, it all resets and you don't have to worry about it anymore. There's a new chance to find something interesting to do instead. Well, it's very difficult for me to describe what I'm getting at because I keep forgetting what I'm getting at. I'm trying to say, game good, in various ways. Here I am, not realizing or not remembering properly once again that being moved into something damages it. So I was trying to defend that train by blocking the enemy with my own mech, but that also destroys the train, so that didn't work out. Although doing that also allows me to block an enemy spawn, so maybe it was worth it to just take the hit. We're moving on now to the final stage of this desert island, where, in this stage in particular, I was really getting into moving enemies around, because like right here, we can kill an enemy using the boss enemy, which also explodes and kills the other enemy, which was the thing that causes the explosions, while another unit, by just not attacking, can block an enemy spawn. And we had a really good first turn in the boss stage, so it's now going to be easier from here, since every stage is a short positive feedback loop in that regard. If you do something clever immediately, it gets easier and easier to keep being clever throughout the stage. So right here we just move the enemy. It's really satisfying to be like, nope, you don't get to attack me, how about you attack your ally instead? And then I can just stand here blocking more enemies coming onto the map, and you feel really in control. Like the enemy had so much power, they could have defeated you so easily, but they just straight up didn't because of minor things you did. It feels really finessey. Well, we get to the end of that island. We can buy some stuff. This time I actually bought some equipment, but we're nowhere near having enough currency to fully upgrade the mechs. You can get like 10 power cores on the mechs and give them tons of abilities, but I never really got more than like 2 or 3. And, well, this makes me think I'm missing something in the game. I never found a way to get more than like 2 or 3. We'll see that I actually haven't played this game very much in this commentary, and that's sort of going to be the takeaway point in the end. There feels like there's some way to get stronger that I don't know about or don't appreciate. Well, here we are, in the final mission. That was quick, wasn't it? After completing the 2 islands, it tells you you can do 2 more if you want, but the final level is available, and its difficulty scales based on how powerful you are. So I read that as meaning there's no point in doing the other 2 islands. Like, what would I gain by doing them if it makes the final boss harder? I can't train up or anything like that, or seek some advantage in the other islands to improve my chances of success. Well, it's just the issue with level scaling. It's like the ultimate balance punch. You can't be too weak, and you can't be too strong. The game will always be balanced, which sometimes is good, but sometimes it's like, oh, so I can't do anything to get an advantage, huh? I can't make it unbalanced and then enjoy the fact that I earned it being unbalanced in my favor. That's a shame. So with that in mind, I thought, well, I guess I'll just skip the rest of the game, and here's the final boss, let's just do it. This was a nice stage because there's tons of environmental hazards, and here's a neat move where I can stop an enemy spawning by moving an enemy twice, and also not have to move my other mech, which stops another enemy spawning. All the good stuff, the kind of small chains of tactics that work together, that are easy to think of, really powerful to pull off, and it just keeps happening in quick succession. Real good stuff, satisfying, puzzle-ish gameplay. Another thing to remember about this final boss stage is that you're sort of free to take damage now, because it won't matter very much anymore, and you actually don't lose any civilians if these blue things we're supposed to be defending get destroyed. Here's a neat move where I can kill 2 enemies with 1 shot and avoid moving myself off the block spawn place. All good stuff, although I'm going to move off anyway because we need to protect those other 2 pylons over there from that enemy. Boom, something cool just happened, but we've given up our ability to stop the enemy spawning, so here they are going to swarm in at us. Won't matter too much in this case, we get away with this. We also get away with that over there. We saw I took some damage on a pylon. There is a 15% chance that you'll just not take damage when the enemy attack you. And my opinion is throw that out the window. Like, this game's so nearly the perfect not RNG game. So it was a tiny bit hinge, the strategy isn't completely deterministic. And while I'm seeking a deterministic strategy game because I feel like it's satisfying, I understand it's unimmersive and it's stupid, but the interesting thing about strategy games is enhanced when things are completely deterministic and you can work out strategies, which for the most part is what this game does well, and that's why I think it's good. Well, this is a nitpick, it barely matters at all. One thing you might have noted is that we're still in the final boss. There are 2 stages to the final boss, which obviously I didn't expect, so I thought I'd completed the game. But then you do another stage that's just back to back with the other one, where you have to protect a bomb, and if you wait 5 turns, you win again. As for what's actually happening if you wandered in the lore, we've gone underground to fight the insects. I think this is where they come from, I don't know. There's nothing here that looks like it's where they come from, but they're here. If we blow up this place, the whole problem will be solved. I guess we could have done this from the beginning. Well, forget the lore. Try to forget the lore, it really doesn't matter very much. I actually just thought that I suppose the reason in-game why you can't just stop the insects is because you had to save the civilians on the islands first. Well, I don't know. We need more than 3 guys taking care of this insect problem. I don't know where these islands are. Is there no funding for a military program? We've only got 3 people working on this. I don't know. Well, that civilians thing, by the way, actually ties into something I said earlier. While I was saying you can go on to the final stage whenever you want, you do save less civilians that way, because it sort of implies that if you don't do the stages on the other islands, then everyone just died, and that was the end of that. And what this changes in the game is, well, not very much. I think I'll just rant about that later, because it will come up in a second. Maybe it matters if you save the other islands. Seems like it doesn't to me. Here was a great chance, by the way, to use a weapon I'd bought in the shop that has a very specific damage output, where it makes this T-shaped damage window that pushes enemies backwards. We can do that to take out 2 enemies with 1 shot, and thus save that pylon from taking 2 damage as well. Neato! Like most of the cool things in the game, it makes you scream Neato. Or maybe that's just me. This final engagement is easy enough. There's no like real big enemy or anything that makes it super challenging. It's similar to the other stages. Plus, because you can sacrifice some of your health quite freely, the health on the power that is, you sort of have more options in that you don't always need to actually avoid damage. Well, we do it. So what happens? Well, we're going to redeploy to other timelines. So it's getting clearer and clearer that while it kind of feels like we're finishing the game, obviously we're not. And if I knew anything about the game going into it, I probably would have expected this. And I had some hints going along that we're probably going to have to play the game again. Well, what actually happens? We blow up the floor, something else also blows up. Looks like we're just blowing up this entire part of the world. You can see it from space, very nice. And that was that. What even was that? Well, I don't know. Again, don't worry too much about the plot. It comes up saying that the Vec Hive has been destroyed and we've saved the timeline. We saved 10,000 people. We also apparently saved 4.6 billion people across all of Earth. I don't really know what these insects were going to do. I guess we've stopped them from eventually conquering the world. I don't know, would no one else have stopped them if we didn't blow them up like that? Who knows? I don't even know what those insects were. They might even be aliens for all I know. Something's going on there. The timeline has been saved from them, but our characters are going to go and save another timeline. It's more like a time loop than saving different timelines in that you just go back to the start of the game and everything is mostly the same. And this is where this game kind of swerves away from being a roguelike, in my opinion. If you take something like Hades, the good roguelike in quotes, it's a case where you can complete the game in say 30 minutes. It's quite short. But you're supposed to play the game like literally 100 times in slightly different ways to get through all of the content. But this game doesn't necessarily have content in that sense. Like here, we've completed the game, you're sent back to just the main menu, and you just have the opportunity to play the game again. It's not completely like nothing has changed, there are some things have changed, but I'm going to argue that it's not enough, and this is the main thing I ended up not liking about the game. What you actually do, the sort of meta progression in the game, what you're supposed to be doing, other than stopping the Vec, is collect achievements. That's the main focus. And actually, for almost all of the achievements, it doesn't matter at all what happens in the campaign. There's this big disconnect that I don't really like. The thing that struck me was that when I played on my Steam Deck and I lost on the first island, nothing is different between what happened there and when you win, because you can also get achievements and then lose. You can get achievements and then win. Either way, it just puts you back on the start menu. You have the same character again to use as your new pilot. only now because the pilot has some experience points, they are carried over, so it will be a bit easier the second time. Although the other pilot who trained up just disappears, and I think that's a missed opportunity, really. There are some metagame things, as it says here, so if you play the game a few times, some of the achievements are based on your overall achievements as you play the game in a meta sense, like the game Into the Breach. You can progress through the game by doing some stuff lots of times, but it's mainly challenges. And a lot of these challenges are just things that you would set out to do specifically. You might think, I don't have this challenge, I'll go and play a run that does this specific thing. And the run doesn't have to succeed, you don't have to complete the game or anything, you just have to get the challenge done, as far as I can tell anyway. So, it feels like there's a disconnect between there being a reason for me to play the game, and the game being so good, and this disconnect I'm referring to is the thing that I was battling with in my mind when I was like right here on this screen being like, I completed the game, that was really good, I was eager to play it again, but there's no point. That sort of thought was coming into my head, like, if I played the game again, nothing will happen. And because I'm aware that just losing the game has the same effect as winning the game, I'm like, why? What are we doing here? What's my motivation? Are we ever going to break the time loop? Can we win the game? Can we stop the evil Vec insect in some permanent way through something that we do with each run? Well, I don't think there is. I've only played the game a few times actually because I was so put off by this lack of motivation to play that I ended up not going through it very many times, even though I really liked it, and I'm in this strange conflicted situation where I'm sitting there about to click on play on Into the Breach, and then I think, I guess there's no point, I should play something like with more long-term potential that I can make a video about and that I can sort of get into and think about more. Here it's more like, I could play it for my own amusement, but I know that after I'm done I'll just think, well, I could have just done nothing and that would have been the same. True of all video games, but you have to have something of an illusion in the metagame by feeling like, yes, with this gameplay session, I have progressed something. If you sat down for a session of Into the Breach, you might have fun, but nothing in the game is likely to progress, and you don't feel like, I'm ready to do something new next time because of this. All you can do is, well, you saw me doing it here, you can spend your achievement coins on side grades to get different mechs. Not necessarily better, but different. The big thing that I expected was that you could use some kind of collected currency to go into the stages with some mech power already loaded in, so you'd be more powerful in the beginning. But this is a game where it wouldn't matter if you're more powerful in the beginning, because there's nowhere to go with that. There's no challenge that you can't overcome on your first run that you need to power up so you can come back on the second run ready to overcome it. And that's another thing where it feels different to the classic roguelike setup. So I'm using the word roguelike here, but what I mean is it's a game that you start again. I think that's really the connection with the roguelike genre. It doesn't have the progression based on being starting again. It doesn't have a system where you get further and further each time and discover new content, and something that you're doing in these runs is affecting some other game that's happening outside of the runs, a la Hades. It feels like you need a way to stop the time loop, basically. We should be doing something like collecting our veteran pilots and putting them aside into our time army, and somewhere there's some sort of big challenge or dungeon you have to go through with the time army you've built up over the runs, and you're trying to collect powerful mechs and experienced pilots, ready to see if you can do that challenge, and that's the real complete the game moment. As it stands, it doesn't feel like there's going to be something like that in the game. But all that said, all that ranting aside, is the stuff that you do unlock with the challenge coins good? Yeah, it's really good, because when you play the game again with new rules, new weapons, new movement rules to exploit, it's like discovering the game again for the first time. It's super fun again. Now, under this rant, you saw me also investigating the difficulty levels. This is something that I also don't quite understand, because you can choose to play on easy. So this new campaign, we're on easy, and the only difference it seems to talk about is that you get less points, or fewer points for playing. And I was thinking, well, what do you mean points? Like, I had a score the whole time. What do points mean? Prizes? Do I care about that? I eventually deduced that by points they mean how many civilians you save. So on lower difficulties there are fewer civilians to save, so you have less potential to get a high civilian saved number, and that's the 0 in the top right. I don't think it does anything. So I didn't have any motivation to be like, oh, maybe I should play on hard difficulty now. Instead, well, the opposite. I thought, well, the difficulty levels seem to do so little. I might as well just play on easy. It means there are fewer enemies and you'll just complete the game with more likelihood of success and probably do it faster as well, which helps you get those challenging achievement things. So feels like playing on easy becomes the natural choice here. Not sure about that either. I feel like you want a little bit more progression, you want something to look forward to. One thing to say about the game is that because what easy does is just mean there are fewer enemies, because in many circumstances there being lots of enemies might make a stage easier, in that it makes them more likely to attack each other or get in each other's way and do wacky things, and give you more options for pushing them into each other to do extra damage. Maybe having loads of enemies isn't that bad. Well, probably it's easier for them to not be here, of course, so here we are on easy, 2 enemies to face and some units that can easily just move them around, so we're pretty much guaranteed to avoid damage in a situation like this. So I played through the campaign again on easy, but the point of this rant was, the second time through, I was a little bit more disappointed in advance, thinking, I guess this isn't going anywhere. I liked doing it all of the times I played the game, but I don't like thinking back to this idea that there's an unrewarding feeling to everything, because now we know it doesn't go anywhere, essentially. It doesn't matter if I win, doesn't matter if I lose, you just have to do something specific and that's it, and there's no way to solve the plot in the game or anything like that. There's no real completion of the game other than the thing we already saw. If you complete it once, that's about it. The credits roll and it says you win, now do it again. I feel like there's not enough content after that in the game to keep going. There's just loads and loads of side grades available that are probably all really good, but I want a little bit of forward as well in my progression tree. Here's something I really liked about this new mech setup we've got here. The bomb thrower throws a bomb that counts as a unit for 1 turn, so can block enemy spawns, which means if you use that to just throw it onto their spawn points, you're virtually always guaranteed to kill 1 enemy with it every turn because you just stop them from spawning. And that's pretty good. It doesn't really work like that because they'll attempt to spawn again, so it's only really killing them towards the end of the stage, but if you keep doing it, you're sort of killing them. Well, it keeps them off the stage and makes things easier basically, so it's all good. It's not quite a one-to-one, you are killing them by stopping them spawning thing as I was implying. Well, I enjoyed blocking them with this unit, basically, that's what I'm saying. And that's all I could really say about the rest of the game. I did play this campaign and a campaign with another set of units as well, and I was thinking I enjoy all the different movement options. I enjoy how we're doing the same puzzles but solving them in different and new and clever ways. All very satisfying, but I'm left asking, why am I doing this? And I suppose that's really just my final thought. I haven't even played that much of the game and I'm already giving you my final thoughts, and I suppose that's a point unto itself. I felt like I'm not going to get anything by going any further than this. You can't just make a game that's fun and ask me to play it. What is this? I have a productivity complex. I want there to be some purpose to me playing the game, and this only needs to be an illusion. So it only needs to be playing the game contributes to some number that goes up every time you play the game, and then that contributes to some other thing. So you can complete the game for real if you complete the mini game, the cycling part of the game, 10 times or something, things like that. You collect your party, build it up through the fights, and then you have a dream team reunion at the end where all your best pilots go to defeat the final boss. Something like that. Nothing too complicated really. It's really just something that I'm asking for. And because the game is so good, I suppose that's what makes me having this small complaint so bad, because it really disappointed me. I was ready for that to be there, but it wasn't. I'm so ready to have an excuse to play this game loads more and try out all of the different combinations, but my knowledge that I probably should just play something else instead, something with more progression, something that will feel more rewarding in the long term, well, it's causing me to miss out on having fun in the short term, and this game very well could have provided both with a little bit of extra content, I think. My feeling was like, hey, this is a great demo for a game, we should make a game using these mechanics. Wait, this is the entire game? That sort of thing. Well, maybe I'm just crazy. Well, obviously I am just crazy, but maybe you know what I'm talking about. It's very hard to get this across if you haven't played it yourself, because most of this video is talking about my vague feelings that I had during the game. All the mechanics, they're quite simple, there's not much to say, and they're just straight up good. There's nothing to criticize or point out about them. They all work really well. It's just the game as a whole doesn't use its great features to make a great overall game. I think that's what I'm saying. At least, not for people who have the exact same mental problems as me, where there has to be some purpose to something. You simply can't have fun. It's the modern age. I need an excuse to have fun. Well, we can either go to therapy or we can go back to the Steam store and find something else to play, and I ended up going for the latter, of course, much cheaper as well. But Into the Breach remains in this fond place in my heart. I suppose I loved it and left it. I played it a bit, thought it was one of the best games I've ever played, but I stopped playing it after a couple of hours thinking, damn, how disappointing. How did this happen? Well, I don't want to think about it anymore. Into the Breach 2 is going to blow my mind, that's for sure, if such a thing ever was to exist. It's been a long time actually since this came out. Well, I'll just have to make it myself, the spiritual successor to Into the Breach, which has a tiny bit more content in order to justify the existing content, coming as soon as I end up being unemployed and I'm able to dedicate my life to doing relatively pointless things, like making a version of Into the Breach that I think is 2% better. That's the end of this, whatever this video was, my first impressions and, unfortunately, last impressions. I wanted to give you many more impressions, but I suppose there's no point. And I guess that is the point of this video, if there can be said to be one. I think I'll just go now, but please, if you in the comments have an excuse for me to play Into the Breach some more, tell me what it is so I can justify playing it some more. That would be great. I'll be back with more commentary on video games from a man psychologically incapable of playing video games, probably the optimum target market the developers were going for. Coming soon.